Tracy Martin.
Speaker, I stand on behalf of New Zealand First to put forward a contribution on the Remuneration Authority Amendment Bill. I would like to acknowledge the contribution by Materia Ture and some very, very interesting points that she has raised. At this stage, at this first reading, New Zealand First will support this bill through, but I do believe that Ms. Materia Ture has articulated some really, really interesting questions, concerns, points that I hope get fleshed out as we have this conversation. I'm not confident about it, but I'd like to think that they might. I think it has been articulated by the Green Party contribution and by the Labour Party contribution that urgency is not the best way to actually bring legislation to the floor. And it is with serious concerns that New Zealand First notes that this bill was supposed to come to the floor a couple of times last week. Well, depends on your communication, I guess, Mr. Woodhouse. Anyway, a couple of times last week, and that today we finally have it. There was a bill and a supplementary order paper. I have received instruction that they have been combined. They have, so that happened this morning, and it's happened this morning. So therefore, this bill has actually only been available just prior to question time, which is not the best way to have confidence that what the bill says is what the minister proposing the bill says it will do. And I do think that the suggestion put forward by the Green Party contribution that as there are two parts, quite clearly two parts now in the this short period of time I've had to look at the MB contribution, that there are quite clearly two parts now to the bill. One, which stops the inappropriate 3.5% increase, and that we agree with, again, the Green Party contribution, with everybody's contribution, that that is inappropriate. However, we don't happen to agree with the articulation by the National Party members that the reason why it's inappropriate suddenly, we're in urgency. I mean, there's been 6 years that the government could have dealt with this situation, could have changed the criteria without actually looking like it's hauled the Remuneration Authority in for a good hiding and then sent them on their way. That they could have dealt with this over the last 6 years as opposed to today, but it's not anything to do with it's got nothing to do with the global financial crisis. It has more to do with the 40,000 members of the public service who are about to go into bargaining. It has more to do with the 17,000 members in the health sector, mostly clerical assistants and public and mental health workers. It has more to do with the 1,100 correction staff, 3,100 Inland Revenue staff, 430 Ministry of Women and Statistics New Zealand staff. It has more to do with the staff at the Artificial Limb Service and the 800 Department of Internal Affairs workers, 150 staff from the Blood Service, 1,650 Ministry of Justice workers, 2,400 staff from Child, Youth and Family, 1,150 from Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, and 300 Parliamentary Service workers who are also going to be seeking acknowledgement for their work and what they do and the fact that they deserve a pay rise. So we also think the timing is particularly interesting, that the 2nd of March was when the Prime Minister made this statement that we were going to be dealing with this now under urgency, after 6 years of opportunity, now under urgency, that a by-election had been called in Northland. And we all know that Northland is a place where the majority of the workers in Northland and the majority of the unemployed in the country pretty much sit up in Northland, but the majority of the workers up in Northland also among the most lowly paid inside our nation. So we don't think this has got anything to do with the global financial crisis and constraint from that perspective and that sort of good, warm, fuzzy feeling from the government at all. We think this is a very political move on behalf of the government. It happens to be the right move It's just not well done. So we will be listening for further contribution from the government benches as they try to convince us and the nation that that the only reason that this is here now under urgency is because the first part must be dealt with under urgency. And again, I point to the Green Party contribution around transparency. That is the whole. One of the benefits of the Select Committee process is the ability for New Zealanders to come in and actually say what they think. And I think if there is anything that we should be confident about in this House is that should the criteria, should the purpose, should the first part of this bill go to Select Committee, we should be confident that we can stand in our place and say to the people of New Zealand, we do this job, we give it our all, we do it for you, and what do you think that is worth? What is that reasonably and honestly and fairly worth? If we can't do that, then we've got a larger problem than 3.5%. So I think it is very interesting, and I will listen very carefully to the rest of the conversation around these issues. I do want to pick up on a point that Ms. King said. We are also working on a supplementary order paper because we find it very interesting inside the statement that provides the authority must fix the salaries of MPs so that they can only move up in line with the movement in the average ordinary time weekly earnings for full-time equivalent public sector employees. Where we'd like some clarification around equivalent public sector employees. Who is that? Who is great? Nice to well, the Minister has just said that we'll find it in the bill. The fact that we've actually only had the bill for the hour before question time. Thank you so much, Minister. That'd be nice to actually be able to read it finally. So not the bill you incorporated into your supplementary order paper, Minister, but you can keep running that line if you like. So, but we will bring in a supplementary order paper because we're looking at amending the Remuneration Authority Act 1977 to provide a sole criteria for the Remuneration Authority to consider when reviewing the total remuneration of all positions within its jurisdiction. The current bill amends only the salaries for members of Parliament but leaves untouched the remuneration of judges and CEOs of local government, among others. And we see that these occupations also should be considered by this Parliament as to whether they are appropriately in line with the rest of New Zealanders out there, putting in a full day's work for a fair day's pay. So our supplementary order paper would address those at that top take level, and we believe that it shows leadership. We believe that it would show leadership across the whole of the sector. It was interesting that Mr. Farrar, David Farrar, now he's a well-known lefty, I think, isn't he? Mr. David Farrar has helpfully compared MPs to judges, and an MP used to get 73% of what a district court judge gets, but today they just get 48%. And this excludes superannuation subsidies that are far more generous to judges. And then Mr. Farrar compared cabinet ministers to High Court judges. In 1985 they were paid almost the same. Ministers got $957 more. Today a cabinet minister gets just 67% of what a High Court judge gets. They get paid almost $150,000 less. Now we're not suggesting that that means that we need to go up towards High Court judges. What we are suggesting is things have got out of kilter. And my final contribution about things getting out of kilter would be the fact that in the 1970s, teachers and members of Parliament wages were similar. Right. In the 1970s, teachers and members of Parliament wages were similar. And so things have got completely out of kilter. We believe this is an opportunity to bring it back, but we also believe that we are not confident that the government knows itself what's inside this bill and how it will fold out at the end of the day, because it hasn't taken the time, and it had 6 years to do so, it hasn't taken the time to truly work this through. Kia ora.